Two legends of Hollywood. Two icons who could command a room with a smile, a glance, a single line. Jack Nicholson, the devilish grin, the magnetic presence, the man who defined cool and chaos. Robin Williams, the manic energy, the uncontainable joy, the laughter that could fill the darkest corners. Fans adored them, critics analyzed them, Hollywood coveted them. But behind the laughter, behind the pranks, behind the applause, there were truths the world never saw. Whispers of rivalry, glimpses of tension, and unspoken admiration that neither dared fully admit. Now, at 88, Jack Nicholson has finally opened up. Not in interviews littered with jokes, not in press events polished for the cameras, but in a rare, candid reflection on his life and career. The stories he shares about Robin Williams are not just anecdotes, they're confessions. They confirm what fans suspected, what insiders hinted at for decades, that beneath the public friendship was a complex, often complicated bond between two of Hollywood's most magnetic figures. And the truth Jack finally reveals is more human, more heartbreaking, and more illuminating than anyone imagined. Before the bright lights, before the Oscars and world tours, there were two boys trying to find their place. Jack Nicholson, growing up in New Jersey with a complicated family dynamic, learned early to mask pain with charisma and wit. He discovered a hunger for attention not through formal education, but through observing human behavior, memorizing expressions, and learning to tilt a room with a glance. His path to Hollywood was neither direct nor easy. Small theater roles, minor TV appearances, and a persistence bordering on obsession led him to the parts that would eventually define a generation. He wasn't born a star, he became one, forging his persona piece by piece, always aware of the camera, always calculating the effect. Meanwhile, across the country in Chicago, Robin Williams was carving his own path. The manic energy that would later mesmerize audiences was already evident. Comedy clubs became his laboratory, where improvisation honed not only his comedic timing, but his emotional sensitivity. Williams had a way of seeing the world in a spectrum of absurdity and tragedy simultaneously, blending laughter and pathos in ways few could understand. Friends remember him practicing voices in the mirror for hours, pacing hotel rooms, or jotting notes for sketches that may never see the light of day. His ambition was tempered by a need for connection. He craved recognition, but also yearned to belong. By the late 1960s, Jack and Robin were heading toward Hollywood stardom, but in very different ways. Nicholson's career took root in dramatic roles, the kind that left audiences mesmerized by his intensity. Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces, Chinatown. Williams gravitated toward comedy, the medium through which he could channel both genius and vulnerability. Mork and Mindy, stand-up specials, offbeat roles that revealed his ability to fuse humor and heartbreak. On the surface, their trajectories were distinct, but the seeds of similarity, an uncontainable drive, a fear of mediocrity, a hunger to be seen as more than just a performer, were already planted. Hollywood, in its relentless way, would eventually bring them together. At first it was small moments, award shows, mutual friends, industry dinners. Nicholson, the elder by over a decade, saw in Williams both a threat and a kindred spirit. Williams, in turn, admired Nicholson's confidence and fearlessness, but sometimes felt overshadowed by his presence. Both men were intensely private in certain ways, yet performative in others, a duality that would shape their relationship for decades. Rumors of behind-the-scenes pranks, subtle competitions, and quiet rivalry began circulating among insiders. Though the public only glimpsed the surface, laughter, camaraderie, and seemingly effortless chemistry. And while the world saw friendship and mutual respect, only Nicholson could articulate what it truly meant to share space with a talent like Williams. It wasn't just admiration, it was tension, awe, and sometimes envy. Two giants of their craft, both pushing boundaries, both hungry for connection, yet both carrying personal demons that colored every interaction. By understanding their early lives, the vulnerabilities, ambitions, and fears, we begin to see why their friendship was as volatile as it was profound. And why, decades later, Nicholson's reflections would finally reveal truths about Robin Williams that the world suspected but never heard spoken aloud. By the 1970s and 1980s, Jack Nicholson and Robin Williams had become forces of nature in Hollywood, albeit in very different orbits. Nicholson, already an Academy Award-winning actor, was cementing his place as Hollywood's embodiment of both charm and menace. He could walk into a room and bend it to his will, and the camera seemed to worship every smirk, every raised eyebrow, every subtle shift of expression. Meanwhile, Williams was a rising star whose comedic brilliance was impossible to ignore. His performances were electric, spontaneous, often leaving co-stars bewildered by the intensity of his energy. Though their paths didn't cross frequently at first, the industry quickly took note of two men whose talents seemed to exist on completely different yet parallel planes. One the embodiment of controlled chaos, the other of untamed genius. Their first encounters, according to insiders, were a delicate dance between admiration and unspoken rivalry. Nicholson, a seasoned veteran, recognized Williams' extraordinary gift almost immediately. "He's unstoppable," Nicholson would reportedly mutter after observing a set rehearsal, half amused, half wary. Williams, for his part, both revered and envied Nicholson, seeing in him a master of subtlety and command, someone who could dominate a scene without ever raising his voice, who could make audiences fall in love with his flaws. Yet Williams's frenetic energy sometimes clashed with Nicholson's calculated timing, and their exchanges backstage and at industry gatherings were often charged with a subtle tension that only insiders could read. They laughed together, joked, shared stories, but beneath the surface there was the quiet, mutual awareness that each man was exceptional in a way the other could not replicate. Their careers occasionally overlapped on projects, award ceremonies, and philanthropic events. At times, they were the epitome of Hollywood camaraderie, sharing meals, entertaining friends, mentoring younger actors, even attending the same parties with a mischievous sense of one-upmanship that only legends of their caliber could pull off. Nicholson enjoyed teasing Williams, who often responded with impromptu impressions, turning Nicholson's sardonic humor into fodder for his own comedic genius. Fans rarely saw these subtle power plays, but they fueled the private dynamics that would shape the bond between these two men. To the outside world, it looked like friendship. Insiders knew it was more complex. Despite the competition, there was genuine admiration, an understanding that each man's brilliance could not diminish the other. Nicholson respected Williams's improvisational instincts, his ability to inhabit characters at a lightning pace, and the depth of vulnerability he could convey beneath the humor. Williams, in turn, admired Nicholson's precision, his ability to anchor chaos with a mere glance or tone, and the sheer audacity of his choices on screen. In private conversations, Nicholson would reportedly offer Williams advice, sometimes cryptic, sometimes blunt, how to navigate Hollywood without losing oneself, how to pick roles that challenge but don't destroy, how to maintain a sense of humor when fame becomes suffocating. Williams listened and laughed. But he was also fiercely independent, determined to carve his own legacy without being overshadowed. Yet, as their careers progressed, the line between collaboration and competition became increasingly blurred. Each accolade, each box office triumph, each standing ovation was a reminder of what the other could do. Nicholson's successes were quietly envied by Williams. Williams's improvisational brilliance, occasionally unpredictable and dazzling, reminded Nicholson of the raw energy he could never fully control. And while neither man publicly acknowledged these undercurrents, the respect and subtle tension was palpable. This dynamic, this intricate dance of admiration and rivalry, is what made their interactions so fascinating and, ultimately, why Nicholson's revelations about Williams decades later are so compelling. They weren't just colleagues or friends. They were two men who reflected, challenged, and sometimes unsettled each other, creating a bond that was as volatile as it was extraordinary. While Jack Nicholson and Robin Williams shared moments of laughter, mentorship, and public camaraderie, the truth behind the scenes was far more nuanced. Hollywood, after all, thrives on appearances, and both men were masters of performing not just on screen, but off it. Nicholson, with his devilish grin and cool detachment, and Williams, with his explosive energy and rapid-fire humor, created a perfect illusion of friendship for the cameras. But those who spent time with them privately noticed subtle signs of tension. fleeting glances that lingered a second too long, half-smiles that hinted at unspoken comparisons, and conversations that could shift from jovial to pointed in the blink of an eye. It wasn't animosity. It was something far more intricate, two extraordinary talents recognizing, and sometimes envying, the brilliance of the other. Nicholson's insight into Williams was both candid and complex. He admired the younger actor's improvisational genius, the way Williams could electrify a room with pure energy. Yet Nicholson also understood the volatility behind that brilliance.
He had navigated Hollywood's treacherous waters for decades and knew that the industry's adoration could be fleeting.
Williams, Nicholson sensed, was driven not just by joy but by a profound fear of inadequacy, a relentless need to prove himself in every performance, every improvisation, every laugh. Nicholson reportedly found himself both protective and wary, a mix of mentor and observer, recognizing that genius is often accompanied by fragility, and that Robin Williams carried his in abundance. The dynamic between them became especially visible during award seasons and press events. While photographers captured shared smiles and playful banter, Nicholson would later admit that he sometimes felt a pang of envy, not born of malice, but from witnessing Williams's effortless connection with audiences. He too could command a room, but Williams had an electricity that seemed untethered, capable of bending the mood of an entire theater with a single gesture. And while Nicholson had built his legacy on intensity, charisma, and controlled unpredictability, he recognized that Williams's spontaneous brilliance was something he could never fully replicate. This acknowledgement, Nicholson said, was humbling, sometimes uncomfortable, but ultimately a mark of respect. Yet the tensions weren't just professional, they were deeply human. Both men had endured personal hardships, Nicholson with complicated family dynamics and a relentless public gaze, Williams with private struggles with depression and anxiety. These experiences, combined with the pressures of fame, meant that moments of vulnerability were often masked by performance. Nicholson described instances when Williams would retreat suddenly after a moment of brilliance, laughter fading to silence, leaving others puzzled. Conversely, Nicholson sometimes felt misunderstood by Williams, who couldn't always grasp the calculated layers behind his expressions and pauses. And still, despite the misunderstandings and the unspoken competitions, their bond endured, shaped by a shared understanding of what it meant to live under the unyielding spotlight of Hollywood. If you're captivated by Hollywood's hidden stories and the complex relationships behind legendary actors, like this video, subscribe, and comment below. Which actor friendship surprised you the most? Your engagement helps us continue uncovering the untold stories of cinema's greatest icons. In reflecting on Williams, Nicholson revealed one of the most striking truths. Their friendship was built on mutual respect, occasional rivalry, and an unspoken awareness of each other's brilliance. Nicholson admitted that while he may have occasionally felt envy, it was always tempered by admiration. Robin was unstoppable, Nicholson said, and sometimes I had to remind myself I was watching a force of nature. Their relationship, he explained, was a delicate balance, support, competition, humor, and vulnerability all entwined. And through decades of highs and lows, public adoration and private struggles, Nicholson came to understand a fundamental truth about Robin Williams, that genius often comes with solitude, and brilliance can be as isolating as it is inspiring. At 88, Jack Nicholson has spoken candidly about Robin Williams in a way he never had before, stripped of Hollywood polish, devoid of anecdotes meant solely for entertainment, revealing the human truth beneath the laughter and the myth. Nicholson described Williams not just as a friend or colleague, but as a kindred spirit, a man whose brilliance was inseparable from his pain. Robin, Nicholson said, was a tornado wrapped in a smile. He could make you laugh until you cried, but sometimes the laughter hid what he couldn't say. For decades, the world saw Williams as pure joy incarnate, a comic genius who could fill stadiums and film sets with his energy. But Nicholson's reflections confirm what many suspected. Behind the manic humor was a vulnerability that few could penetrate, and even fewer truly understood. Nicholson admitted that their friendship was complicated, not because of rivalry or resentment, but because of their mutual recognition of the pressures of genius. Both men understood that Hollywood adored them, yet could also be cruel. That audiences loved the characters they portrayed, but often ignored the human being beneath. Nicholson shared private moments where he witnessed Williams' profound loneliness, quiet reflections backstage, off-camera moments when the laughter stopped, revealing a man who wrestled with insecurities even as he performed miracles with improvisation. "We both knew what it meant to be trapped in a world that only wanted the performance," Nicholson said. And somehow, Robin carried it with more grace than most. Their interactions were filled with subtle mentorship, playfulness, and honesty. Nicholson described occasions where he advised Williams on navigating the industry, offering cryptic insights, sometimes blunt, sometimes wryly humorous. Williams, Nicholson recalled, would listen intently, occasionally testing limits, always with a restless energy that Nicholson found both inspiring and humbling. Yet, beneath the surface, there was an unspoken truth. They admired each other's brilliance, but also felt the weight of what that brilliance demanded. Nicholson admitted he sometimes envied Williams's spontaneity, the way he could effortlessly bend the world with humor and heart, but that envy was tempered by profound respect. "He taught me more than anyone I've known," Nicholson said quietly. The revelation that has captivated fans is Nicholson's candid acknowledgement of Williams's struggles and humanity. He confirmed that while Williams brought joy to millions, he also carried immense pain, a duality that made his genius so compelling, but also so fragile. Nicholson's words humanized the man who could mimic presidents, voices, and entire personalities, reminding audiences that even the most extraordinary performers are susceptible to loneliness and heartbreak. For Nicholson, reflecting on Williams is both a tribute and a confession, a recognition of a friendship that was as deep as it was complicated, filled with joy, admiration, tension, and ultimately, loss. Nicholson concluded with a statement that is as poignant as it is revealing. Robin Williams was a force of nature, and like all forces of nature, he left a mark that cannot be measured, only felt. He made the world laugh, yes, but he also reminded me, in every conversation, in every shared silence, that behind the laughter, we are all just trying to be seen, to be understood, to be human. And I finally see him for what he was, a brilliant, fragile, extraordinary man who I will never forget. In the end, Nicholson's reflections do more than confirm what fans suspected. They illuminate the extraordinary bond between two Hollywood legends, the delicate interplay of admiration, envy, mentorship, and love that existed behind the cameras. The laughter, the pranks, the films, they were only part of the story. The real story is the human connection, the unspoken truths, and the enduring legacy of two men who changed Hollywood forever, and who, through their brilliance and vulnerability, reminded the world that even legends are human.